Hey everyone, Nathan Long here, president of Saybrook University, back with another episode of Saybrook Insights. One of the richest moments of my professional career was the time I spent interviewing at Saybrook University for the role of president. And during the interview process, what struck me most was the incredible community that had been built. One rooted in humanistic values, a commitment to social justice, and really, truly remarkable individuals across the spectrum, including our students. And over the years, I never cease to be amazed by the caliber of our students who pursue their graduate education. Brilliant people seeking a rigorous graduate education while having the flexibility of that virtual education within a nonprofit university setting that espouses a powerful mission like Saybrook's. And almost down to the last student, nearly every one of them that I talk to says that what drew them to Saybrook first is our mission, what we stand for, and how we go about educating. That's not a marketing gimmick. It's real talk from real people who get it. So today's guest is one of our very own students who's now a graduate, Ms. Niki Wikstrom. Niki's a mom to three kids and a Southern California native. She has a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from UCLA, and she just finished her master's degree here at Saybrook University in the Humanistic Psychology specialization in consciousness, spirituality, and integrative health. Niki embodies the type of student who comes to Saybrook, whip smart, super motivated, and a working parent, no less, who's active in advancing positive social change in her community. We're going to learn more about her various pursuits on this episode, along with how her journey to Saybrook went and what's next. All right, let's get to it with Ms. Niki Wikstrom. Ms. Niki Wikstrom, thank you so much for joining us today on Saybrook Insights. Before we get started, we ask our guests the same question to get the ball rolling. Tell us all about you, your personal history relating to your academic and professional life, and your journey to Saybrook University. So take it away, Niki.
That's such a big question. I'll start with thank you for having me. Thank you for asking me to be here. Um, Gosh, it starts from the beginning, really. And my time at Saybrook I've been able to really think about how I ended up at Saybrook and through Saybrook. And it all starts from the beginning. Just I've always had this inner knowing that has guided me throughout life, just where I thought I'd end up or what things were important. I'm an only child, so I had that old soul kind of a thing where I was reading self help books from Wayne Dyer since I was 12 and 13. And I went to my first Deepak Chopra lecture when I was 15 or 16 because I lied about my age and I lied about my age to go to a Deepak Chopra lecture. So not to go to like a club or anything. And this was back when he was doing like regular Hyatt ballrooms, like nothing super fancy.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, so I have always felt like I've been on a path. Um, I get in my own way all the time, but I've always been on a path. So, I've always been interested in making myself better. I've always been really introspective. I'll have a conversation with someone, and at the end of it, think about how I could have done that differently, or if the words that I meant to say came out the way that they should. Um, it's gotten me in a little trouble in relationships because then I just assumed that everybody did that. And if other people weren't so careful with their words, I was really resentful that they weren't taking that same care with their speech. So I grew up in South Central LA, and I knew I love this place. It is enriching my soul, but I know that I'm made and destined for more. Ended up going to UCLA for undergraduate. My major was psychobiology, and it was hard because I was working full time, and a lot of my peers were not. So there was a competition at UCLA that was it was pretty severe. So I eventually ended up switching my major to psychology only, because I felt like it gave me the space to actually have an experience in college instead of letting it just fly by. So I graduated with my bachelor's in psychology, and I thought for sure I was going to go to medical school. And then I thought for sure I was going to go to chiropractic school, and then I thought for sure I was going to go to physician assistant school. And life in Southern California really got in the way. It's an expensive state, so it's really easy to get caught up in just living. How do I pay my rent? How do I survive?
Indeed.
So I started working in physical fitness. I started teaching group yoga when I was 18, and then got a job as a personal trainer, where I was really just people's therapist. So I always knew, like, oh, there's something here. There's something here that I should be doing. But then had a few kids, got married, continued in embodied movements. I went on to become a Pilates instructor and lactation educator. I have so many certificates. I just sort of find them like around.
I was amazed to read just the few that you have. I'm like, where do you get the time? That's so incredible.
I think I was searching. I have always wanted, I've always had really big dreams. So I knew that I wanted a terminal degree. So whether that was like MD, PhD, I knew that that's where I was headed. So I think all these other things I was doing was just saying, well, if I can't do that, then I'll do this and this and this and this and this. And then by the time we got to the pandemic, I looked around and I was like, wow, I've spent a lot of time and a fair amount of money gathering all of these certifications, and none of them are really fulfilling me in the way that that ultimate dream would. So that's when I made the decision to start really searching for a master's program.
And how you ended up at Saybrook then?
How I and I knew the great thing about doing these things after you're 40 and you've had some life experience is that I was no longer searching for the shoulds. This, oh, this seems like what I should major in. I really want to take all of my experience, starting way back with that first Chopra lecture and the yogini that I had become, for 20 years. And I want to see how that all fits together. And I knew it did. I felt it in my soul. But so many of the programs didn't let me explore that, wouldn't let me explore it. And I refused to compromise. So I narrowed it down to a few schools. Um, and I really felt a pull, a call, a nudge, to Saybrook. And then I had my first interview with Dr. Smirnova, and it was over. I was like, this, this professor is here. I should be there.
Oh, that's great. That's great. What was it about the interview and the experience with Marina or Dr. Smirnova that stood out?
It was relational. She cared, and she didn't care in a way where it's like, "Aw, that's so cute. You want to get your master's degree?" It was deep. It was like, I feel like you should also be here. It from immediately I felt like we were in it together, and she wasn't selling me on anything, and she wasn't trying to convince me of anything. I immediately felt support,
That's awesome.
and she was going to be the my specialization chair. So I thought, if I get to work with people who are like this professor, this is exactly where I belong.
That's wonderful. I mean, what a great testament to that experience and the draw into the university. And you chose an interesting specialization. It's kind of one of the I call it the one of the hearts and souls, if you will, of the university. Maybe talk to the our audience about that and what you looked to do during your master's.
Right. One of the great things about Saybrook is there are all of these offerings. Yeah, I looked at mind body medicine and I was like, that's where I should be. I looked at clinical and I was like, oh, maybe I should go that route. I'll probably be able to get a job. You know, I looked and then I saw CSIH, which is consciousness, spirituality, and integrative health. And I thought, oh, this is so much more. I feel like I can explore the psycho spiritual realm where I found yoga and psychology overlapping in this really nuanced way. I felt like I could better explore that with that specialization. Um, and had I done mind body medicine, which I still think would have been amazing, I felt like I had spent my life in movement for so long that I was just looking for more. So in the CSIH program, I was able to really explore all of these nuanced ways that psychology and yoga interacted with one another. Um, and we haven't yet talked about where my work is. So it's at the intersection of psychology and yoga. But this allowed me to explore what each field could really offer the other, um, as opposed to doing a more practice or movement based field. So I feel like I grew more because I chose a specialization that was outside of what I would normally choose.
Interesting.
And I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah, you really received that kind of the foundational psychological education training, the theoretical aspects of it, and then we're able to kind of cocoon that with your specialization with the consciousness, spirituality, integrative health, and kind of interplay those theories and applications. Is that a fair way to put it?
I would say that, and one of my favorite, I have many favorite things about Saybrook, but one of my favorite things was I was very clear when I started that I wanted there to be a through line with all of my work. Because I want to learn everything about everything. So I had to keep myself focused. And I was able to do that with the support that I had at Saybrook. So every single class, research class, ethics classes, psychology classes, electives, I was always able to meet with the instructor and say, here is what I'm really interested in. And there was never a time where I couldn't find a way to integrate it into the coursework.
That's wonderful. That is kind of the essence of a Saybrook education, ultimately, that you capture beautifully. Did you find that the project was beneficial? So, for those out there, there's usually in graduate school you'll have a either a project or a thesis that you complete, and that could also be the same for a doctorate where you do a capstone project or a dissertation. In your case, you did a project. Maybe talk a little bit about what that entailed. Be interesting to hear that.
Right. So when I came in, I was thinking, I'm going to do a thesis. I'm going to do a thesis because this is a graduate program and you're supposed to do a thesis.
Right.
So,
That's what you have to do. Yeah.
right. Um, and then along the way, I realized I was pushed outside of my comfort zones many times. I was given the opportunity to do podcasts in classes. And since that terrifies me, I did it. And I thought, wow, I get to talk about what my work instead of just writing about it. And that allowed me to develop the skill of being able to talk to anybody in any room, from academia to friends, about what I'm doing. And I think that's a skill that can sometimes be underdeveloped with graduate educations when everything just gets written down. because you start to pick apart every sentence, every word. Several people read it, it's edited, but you um, maybe can't get that information out to people who aren't used to being in those types of situations. So I became really excited about the idea of a project. And I wanted to have my project be this creation, this creative expression of my time at Saybrook. I got to have this tangible piece to walk away with. So I made sure that my project was something that I could do or use or put out into the world in the future.
That is really great. I don't know that I wish I had the presence of mind when I did my master's to have that thought. That's a really great way to look at it. That tangible, almost tactile piece that you can take away and use in whatever work you, and you have a lot of things you're doing, which I want to get into because I'm sure you've been able to apply some of the work you did in your master's to the work you're doing. Before we do that, though, I have a question for the partner, wife, mom, the certified all over the place, amazing superwoman you are. So you did all these amazing things with your degree. You are now done. By the way, she is a freshly minted graduate of our master's program, so congratulations. And you're raising three kids. I see. I think is that a trampoline or a swing set out back there?
It's a
Uh,
trampoline.
mhm. Probably go out in there and jump yourself. How did you balance going to school with all of these other obligations? There are folks that do it, and but you've done it so beautifully. I think I'd be curious. I think our audience would also be curious how you manage that. It's impressive.
That's a great question and an important one, I think, because um, it always seems like I know even when I was considering going to get my master's degree, the first thing I thought was, I can't. I have these people that I'm responsible for. And, right now they're my greatest creation. And I don't want to use money that should be going towards them. And I don't want to take time away from them. And we were in a pandemic when I started at Saybrook, 2020. And so I was effectively homeschooling them, all three of them.
Yeah.
And it was scary. Um, but I started. And then once I started, I definitely had to schedule. There was a lot of scheduling. There was a lot of waking up really early. I prefer early mornings to late nights. So I would rather be up at 5 o'clock in the morning than stay up until midnight. I was taking articles and books with me to every practice. My laptop was always in the car. The One of the great things I liked about Saybrook is that some of the syllabi, even from previous semesters, were available. So even if things changed, I could see which books I needed. I utilized the breaks in between. So during winter break, I was preparing for the spring semester. I did summer also, um, but I was always preparing for the next semester at the end of the previous semester.
Can I just pause you there for a minute? Like for most of my career as an educator, higher educator, I have pleaded with students to do exactly what you did because because personal experience too. You find that you're able to get a lead on the work that you're doing, and it isn't so overwhelming, right? I mean, it can feel overwhelming even when you've done that work, but it gives you that leg up. I want to applaud you for doing that. That's a great presence of mind to be able to have planned it out that way. It makes such a difference, I think. Anyway,
Thank
I don't want to
you.
put words in your mouth, but
No, yes, I mean, it was the only way I could manage it, honestly. That being said, I had many breakdowns. I went to my partner on several occasions and I was like, what am I doing? I can't play with the kids. I'd have my daughter, we would play restaurant, which meant, her little kitchen's right on the other side of this wall. So I was like, while I'm writing my paper, I'll order food and you can bring it to me. And that was the way I was able to play with her. Um, I have cried way too many times in residential conferences to count. Um, when I'm exhausted and when I'm tired, I have found support with peers at Saybrook who can say, I feel the same way. I get it. Call or text me if you need anything. Um, and so I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. And there was something really therapeutic for me about school. There was something, I have this, I have lots of post-its on the wall in front of me. And one of the things I put up here was scholarly writing as practice, as ritual. It has the potential to evolve the writer in as much the same way as focused contemplative practice.
Ooh, nice.
And so I started to approach my work like therapy and like a practice, like something I showed up to every single day faithfully. And I just hoped at the end of it I would be transformed.
That is amazing. So you found a lot of real support through your peers. Sounds like your family has been relatively strongly supportive of your journey as well, and you kept putting one foot in front of the other. I think that's such a that's where you found your inspiration in a way, is that continuous plodding forward and in getting it done. It sounds like, yeah, yeah, that's great. So, in the introduction to your episode, I was marveling at the fact that you've got all these, you're registered in yoga, you're certified in breath work, you've got other certifications as well. You're a Lululemon ambassador, or were. Full disclosure to the audience, Nikki was featured with our board of trustees back in September of 22 as a student standout, with good reason, because in addition to bringing your intellectual self, one of the highlights, I think, of our Saybrook student body is you bring so much and you teach us. And so maybe talk to us a bit about, your work in coming to yoga first, because I'd like to also dig in a little bit with your breath work and your Lululemon efforts as well. But you were doing yoga work at 18. It sounds like leading sessions and supporting members of your community in that regard. Talk a little bit about what drew you to yoga. When did you find it? How did you become registered as a yogi? What all went into that for you?
Yeah, I probably took my first class before I was 18, and it was just at back then they were called Family Fitness. Now, it's 24-hour fitness or
I remember that. Yes,
but
that was back in the day,
that was
Nikki.
back in
Oh
the
my
day.
gosh.
I used to take the bus after high school, after cheerleading practice. I would take the bus um, for the Southern California people down Robertson Boulevard, and I'd get to Pico, and that's where Family Fitness was. And I would basically take every class they offered from when I got there until there were no more, and then my mom would pick me up and drive me home.
Oh wow.
Then I do my homework. So because I would take whatever was offered, sometimes it would be a yoga class, and this was just like 100 people crammed in a room with carpet doing yoga. And I loved the community feel of yoga. I felt like I was getting something from yoga that I wasn't getting from all the other things. Back then it was like step aerobics, high impact, cardio, hip hop, spinning, it was all of those things. But yoga felt like more. And I would say it was less fitness based than it is now. It's grown. The fitness aspect of yoga is really is what is highlighted these days. But back then, there was still really a spiritual component to it. And I've had an evolution with religion and spirituality. And I thought, oh, this seems like a really special way for me to rediscover my relationship with spirituality. But then I felt like something was missing from that. So I'll put a pin in that because I'll come back to it later. I continue to enjoy yoga and the way it made me feel, but I went on to do some other movement certifications first. I did group fitness, I did spinning, I did all the things. I did Pilates because there was something about yoga that felt like maybe people wouldn't take me seriously. I knew I enjoyed it for myself, but I wasn't sure if I could make it a career. So I held off for a while until it just kept calling me. And then I went around to several studios, found the one that resonated the most. And the first yoga certification I took was more of a yoga, it was like a yoga psychology, more philosophy. So it wasn't really focused on how to teach the postures, the asana, the physical postures. It was more like how did yoga come to be in the West? And I learned some interesting things about that and how it was like really influenced by gymnastics and all of these other things. And then I kept digging deeper and deeper. Okay, so what did the the original yoga look like? And then I found that it looked like sitting cross-legged mostly and preparing yourself for meditation. So then I thought, well, how do I learn to do that? So it just started me on this road to how do I get deeper into this practice? So getting a certification in the physical asana led me to exploring meditation and then filling sort of that gap with breath work. Um, and so that's how I kind of and I there's so many different ways to do all of these things. Um, so I started to get more nuanced with it. I started to really discover a love for Tantra because I love the way that Tantra said, yes, bring all of your senses to the practice as opposed to leave them all behind. And when I started at Saybrook, I was able to bring a lot of the tantric philosophy into a lot of my papers because it gelled really well with embodiment work and somatic psychology. Um, there was just so much overlap.
Wow. So, it's interesting you raised that about yoga. My understanding aligns with, but it's a very cursory level as opposed to yours, which is deep, much deeper. That the United States, the way yoga kind of came over and it has sort of manifested for a long time anyway, was in that physical fitness realm, and it really was detached or devoid of the kind of core of what yoga embodied, which is that spirituality, that spiritual element. And it sounds like you were drawn, not that the physical fitness thing is inherently bad, but that you were finding a draw into that spiritual area for you, that spiritual realm to explore that. How did you find that transition? What did you experience as you sort of moved, maybe not away, but augmenting your physical practice with more spirituality?
That's a great question. Um, resistance, resistance from myself because I'm so used to every time I move my body has to be stronger and harder and faster and bigger and more than the last time. Resistance from some of the studios I went to that also push that. Um, I had some really great yoga mentors who gave me ways to start to ease into the spiritual aspects of yoga. Um, one of which was to not make yoga my workout for the day. So let's say even as a mom, okay, I'm going to do the elliptical. So done. Cardio's done now. So when I show up on my mat, I no longer feel like I have to check all the boxes with this one thing. Now I can just focus on my time on my mat being whatever it needs to be in that moment.
Mm, mm,
I wasn't forcing it anymore to be my everything.
yeah.
And then I could just lean into what I needed to lean into.
That's such an evolution for, I mean, it's a beautiful kind of growing into that space, that mindset. That's really wonderful. I think it's so true. I know with meditation, I have to strong arm my way. In the past, I've strong armed my way through this is how it has to be, and I have to be totally this or that. I have to be eliminating any thoughts. And I think over time, some of the mentors I've had in that space have said, it's okay to just be who you are, and that full self is also inclusive of whatever it is that's happening in those moments. It's a little ambiguous, I know, for some folks who are looking for something kind of ironclad, but you really hit the essence there. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's I'm teaching how to create your own breathwork and meditation practice at home. I'm teaching a workshop on that next Sunday. So coming up pretty soon. And what I find the most with people is that I hear all the time, I can't do it. I can't just wait. I can't sit down and not think. And I just, well, you're not supposed to. That's why you have a brain. It's supposed to be doing brain things.
Yeah.
And so when I tell them like I can't do that either, I use breath work as my pathway into meditation. And so some mornings it's just breath work, and some mornings it's breath work and it's this really glorious beautiful thing, and I think I have arrived and I've achieved samadhi and I can, I'm done now. And then the next day, it's like, oh, no, 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 So it's okay for it to be what it is. And you just keep showing up. You just keep showing up, just like I did with my master's program, just like you do every day in life. You just keep showing up to the practice and let it be what it needs to be for you.
That's so, so well put. I think too we get caught up in the right, the arrival point. Like, what is it? What's the objective? And I will say, right, the more we let go of that, there's also a tendency to find out that you end up kind of achieving some of the objectives that you've laid out for yourself. It's interesting. Once you let go, you tend to find yourself in that path of achieving that objective, but you realize maybe after the fact or kind of as you're arriving. I would say, like, on the mindfulness meditation piece of the equation, letting go so much of what's expected. And as I found, it sounds like you found, there's that sense of peace that I was striving for early on, and then I let go of that. And I'm like, I just need to show up. Like you just so said, you just said so beautifully. And as you keep doing it, things start to unfold naturally, and it's really quite a beautiful thing.
Right. When you take the pressure away, and I had the same thing happen in at Saybrook multiple times. Um, and so I'm going to talk about Dr. Smirnova again, but she would always say, the risk is on me. The risk is on me. You just take it. And I was like, the risk is on someone else. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
And I was like, you mean I can just do things? I can just try things? And she's like, yeah, it's on me. And then I was able to create without this fear that I was going to fail or disappoint somebody or not get it right, whatever that means. And I also had that with Dr. Gosselin Jones, because I took a Dimensions of Creativity course with her that changed my life.
Oh,
That
wonderful.
course changed my life. And I remember emailing her once and saying, um, I'm writing this. I started this chronicle of my life and I'm just writing so much and I don't know when to end it. And I don't want it to be too long for you. I mean, I think I was at like 40 pages. And she was like, you'll know when it's time to stop and stop when you're ready. And I was like, oh, it's so simple. And I did. And it was one of my favorite classes and one of my favorite assignments, honestly.
Oh, that's terrific. It unlocked a way of thinking and being that you didn't imagine was possible, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's very cool. Well, we're getting close to the end of our time together. It went by so quickly. But I have a couple more questions, and then we have some what we call the takeaways for our audience, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say on those too. So maybe briefly describe breath work for our audience. That's an I think that's more common now, but for those who aren't aware, what is that for our audience?
Right. So breath work in yoga is pranayama. And depending on the way you break up those words, it can either mean breath control or it can mean breath expansion. And so I like to just think of it as using breath as a tool. And so most of my work in breath came from the yoga tradition initially. And then later I started drawing on some other breath work techniques that that were backed by a lot of research and science. And now I join them together so that I always have something to offer people. So you're using your breath as a tool. And as a tool for what? It's up to you. It can be just to be more present in your life. It can be as an entry point into your spiritual practice. It can be to make it through your morning. It can be because your kids are driving you crazy. It can be because your paper is due. It can be all of these things, but it is there. It's always with you. You don't have to go outside of yourself with breath. It is a constant companion and this really awesome tool we have that is both autonomic, but can also be intercepted and worked with and used. But and it can be misused. It can be misused, and we're getting there. We really can find a way to muscle our our way through everything here. Um, but generally, your breath will protest. If you're pushing it too hard, it will fight back. It will say, no, this is not what I need. So, breath for me is a tool to get to know your body better. It's a tool for you to get to know yourself better. If you pay really, really close attention, it's always whispering to you. It's always saying, you're getting really close to your capacity. Or it's saying, I feel like there's a little bit more. Let me help you enter into this space. It's saying so many things if we just get still and listen.
You're a great teacher. I hung on those words and I knew what it was, but I learned even more in that. Like that was just absolutely beautiful. Thank you for that. Um, we're not going to have enough time to dig into Lululemon, but maybe talk a bit about what's next for you. What's on the horizon as you build out your postmaster's life?
Oh boy, that is also a really big question. And it's terrifying, really, because there's still these expectations that when you're at the end of something, now it's like, okay, what are you going to create? You know? And so I've been giving myself time and space to just be and be proud of what I've accomplished. Um, and it gets away from me all the time. I'm a recovering perfectionist. Um, and so it really gets away from me. But what I want, generally speaking, is to be able to offer this intersection of yoga and psychology or psychology and yoga. I go back and forth about which field I like to put first. Um, and I like to call it a re-embodiment path. And I see it being available in so many spaces. I see it in academia as a way to get people to come and say, you can show up here and it can still be experiential. You can still bring your full self here and you'll leave with knowing more of who you are and you'll leave with this accomplishment. I can see it being used in workshops and lectures, so it's available more to just the person who maybe is already finished with school or maybe has decided that path isn't for them, but I want to give them their self agency back. I want to say there is a space in between doing nothing for your mental health and traditional talk therapy. There's a space there. And all I'm doing is helping you remember what you already know. And then the last piece is really like really getting into more movements and practices. It's really decolonial in a lot of ways, because we're saying there are these institutions and they can be great and they can be helpful, but ultimately you are in charge of your you.
That's a very humanistic way of being in the world, right? I mean, it really is. Yeah, actualizing your best potential and you're in journey with your faculty, with your peers. We try to lateralize that here. I think, we've edged into decolonial praxis. We haven't quite gotten there as a university, but to your point, I think, that way of being in the world is very, very much one of the embodiments of decolonialization. So that's excellent. So we've unfortunately got to wrap it up. Nikki, I could talk to you hours at a time. We've got to do this again. Hopefully, we'll keep you close to our Saybrook orbit along the way. I have two takeaway questions. So,
Okay.
and these are fun. So, you don't get graded on them. You're not, you know, you can take a little bit of time, but it's really first reaction. So don't think too hard about it. So right now, as you think about your experience at Saybrook, what you're doing in the world, what does the term humanistic mean to you?
I think humanistic means two words that pop in my mind right away: whole and relational.
That's an A plus in my book. That's good. I'm not a psychologist, but I think for our psychologists out there, she got it pretty darn good. All right, and then the last question before we head out today: what are three things in your mind? Three things, the Niki Wikstrom big takeaway that people can do to improve their mental, physical, or emotional health right now?
Okay. Breathe, breathe. Like really feel what it feels like. Notice how your breath is in different circumstances. Just notice how it is in different moments. And then once you notice, play around with what makes it better, what what gives it what you need in other moments. And that's a really simple way to just be doing breath work. I noticed, and now I am listening to my body for how to make this be what I need in this moment. Um, the second thing I would say is pause before you relate to others, because I feel like somewhere in that pause you can find compassion. Um, and I think that will hopefully change the world. And oh, I'm torn between rest because I feel like that's what this culture needs, like deep rest, like make rest okay, make rest okay again. Just like just like it's okay if you need a nap. It's okay if you need to lie down with your legs up the wall to reverse the blood flow. And you don't have to make up excuses for it. If someone calls you, hey, what are you doing right now? Well, first of all, you won't answer because you'll be resting. But then when you call them back, you'll say, I was resting.
Yeah, and not to be ashamed of that
Right.
because we're so caught up in it. What a great list. Three very actionable items that people can take with them. Nikki, it has been a joy, an honor, a privilege to meet with you today. Before we go, where can people find you on the web? You've got some great things happening, so mark it away.
I know. So I'm in the process right now of revamping my website, but when that's finished, which is probably only 2 or 3 weeks away, for now you can find me on Instagram, on the Instagram. I'm not great at social media, but I recognize that sometimes it's a necessary evil. So I am Niki Asana on Instagram. It's Nikki with one K, so Nikiasana. Wikstana on IG.
Very good. So we'll find you on the Instagram, as you say. I love it. And what a great time spent with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Nikki, thank you so much. I say this with all of our guests because it's true. I could have spent a couple hours with you digging into all of your various exciting pursuits. I hope you all enjoyed Nikki as much as I did. Remember her three major takeaways. Breathe. Feel what it feels like to breathe. Notice how your breath is in different moments. Play around with what you need in terms of the breath. Notice and listen to your body and make that breath what you need in that particular moment. Number two, pause before you relate to others. In this pause, as Nikki noted, you can find compassion, relationality, you can really connect in a different, meaningful way that isn't reactive. And make rest okay again. Using that idea of rest as something to embrace, not be ashamed of. If you want to see the video stream, please visit our Saybrook University YouTube page. And please, we'd ask you to support the podcast by going to Apple iTunes if that's what you use and leave that 5-star rating and review and subscribe so you can get episodes as they come out. You can do the same thing on Spotify and make sure to follow us. You can, of course, subscribe to us on most major podcast platforms, including Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, and others. Remember to check out our show notes for information on today's guest and for more about our psychology program or the university. Go to www.saybrook.edu. Click on Areas of Study at the top of the page and locate the program to learn more. Or simply Google Saybrook University Psychology Program. All right, that's it for now, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, for being loyal listeners or viewers or both. We're so glad that you're joining us on this Saybrook Insights journey. Take care. Be well.